Diponegoro University has been moving ahead to be the best university in Indonesia by providing 13 faculties of undergraduate and postgraduate. Diponegoro University has graduated 300,000 qualified alumnus. Diponegoro University also establishes vocational schools to generate a ready-to-work alumnus. Holding the fighting values of Pangaran Diponegoro, such as honest, brave, fair and attentive, Diponegoro University keeps producing excellent alumnus nationally and internationally, while also contributing in the development of knowledge, technology, art, culture and exercise.
Diponegoro University now is a rising star. We have planned to become one of university in 500 world university rank. We have been continuously improving the supporting aspect such as regulation, facilities, financial system, bureaucracy management, information system, as well as quality of human resources, quality escalation of Tri Dharma perguruan tinggi is the primary target of Undip by stimulating the downstream of research outcomes that can be beneficially implemented for the society. We are also keen to improve the quantity of national and international academic publication, as well as the number of doctorates and professors in Diponegoro University.
Now, Diponegoro University has been improving in two important aspects of achievement: institutionally and student achievement. Diponegoro University has become a world-class university by being ranked 5th amongst almost 5,000 universities in Indonesia. Meanwhile, the students' achievement in both national and international scales of prestigious events are increasing. The vision to be an eminent research university is supported by the continued increase of research funding. The total research and civil service funding in 2018 is 123.7 billion rupiah. It consists of PNBP, the National Competition Research Funding, and Collaboration Research Funding. The intellectual property right becomes the indicator of significantly improved research. The patent consists of simple patent, patent, international patent, software and invention legal letter. To support the academic process, Diponegoro University has been improving the student facilities. Thus, the students will not only get the knowledge, but also the actualization space. To the academic service, Diponegoro University has built a central computerized system that includes the service for the online study plan and online registration.
Iklim kompetisi di Undip yang sportif dan konstruktif memacu saya untuk terus berprestasi dalam akademik maupun non-akademik.
Didukung dengan fasilitas umum dan keakademikan yang lengkap.
Sehingga membawa Undip masuk 10 besar universitas terbaik di Indonesia.
Undip berada di daerah beragam budaya yang harmonis.
Yang pastinya Undip lebih baik.
Undip lebih baik. Bagaimanapun, Undip pasti lebih baik.
Indonesia is an archipelagic country with one of the world's richest reefs and longest coastline. This gives Indonesia an immense potential in the fisheries and marine sector. The Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science of Diponegoro University has been among the leading marine research institutions in Indonesia, since it was first established as Fisheries Department in 1968 and officially became a faculty in 1994. The Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science is located in the Central Java province. The main campus, where main activities take place, is located in the capital city of Semarang. The second campus, also known as the Marine Science Technopark and Coastal Development Laboratory, is located in Jepara Regency. The vision of the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science is to become an excellent faculty in the field of fishery science and tropical marine in the year 2020. In pursuing its vision, the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science missions are to provide a high-quality education in the field of fisheries and marine science, engage in scientific research and publications, produce intellectual property rights, provide community services in fisheries and marine science field, implement a professional and accountable system, and empower students' activities to achieve the complete graduate qualifications. There are 6 departments in the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science. The first one is Aquatic Resource Management, Capture Fisheries, Aquaculture, Marine Science, Oceanography, Fisheries Product Technology. The faculty provides numerous facilities to support all study and research activities, from student discussion spaces, library, and integrated laboratories. We provide aquaculture lab, biotechnology lab, chemistry lab, hatchery, and geographic information system lab.
The excellence of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science is proud to contribute in fisheries and marine field through artificial patch reef in Panjang Island, Jepara, provides information to the public of Semarang as a reference data for sea level rise on the coast with drop calendar. In our faculty, we collaborate academic, and experimental learning to give the best experience of learning. The faculty have 16 student activity units divided into several fields like art, sport, religious club, research, student executive board, and student senate, where students are allowed to become more involved on campus, increase leadership, social responsibility, and their personal development. One of the organization, Kesemat, received an achievement as the best ASEAN student organizations in 2016. Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science conducts activities in international scale, such as International Tropical Summer Course and International Conference on Tropical and Coastal Region Eco-Development. International Tropical Summer Course is an event for international students from partner universities to learn about coastal ecological preservation and coastal biota in Semarang and Karimun Jawa Island. International Conference on Tropical and Coastal Region Eco-Development is an annual international seminar event that aims to promote and disseminate research results.
The Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science aspire to take a role in strengthening the marine and fisheries field in Indonesia through the application of knowledge from our graduates to achieve and bring positive impact to the society.
Banyak ilmu dan pengalaman selama saya berkuliah di sini. Dan ilmu yang saya dapat sangat cocok dengan bidang yang saya jalani sekarang. Melalui pekerjaan seperti ini, saya mendapatkan kesempatan untuk berkunjung ke tempat yang bahkan tidak pernah saya bayangkan sebelumnya. Perikanan saat ini menjadi sektor yang dibutuhkan di dunia ini. Banyak negara pengekspor ikan, bukan hanya Indonesia. Kebutuhan untuk makan ikan di seluruh dunia pun selalu tinggi, terutama di negara maju.
Saat ini saya bekerja di PT Freeport Indonesia, salah satu tambang terbesar yang ada di Indonesia. Posisi saya saat ini adalah sebagai senior manager di Departemen Lingkungan. Saya bertanggung jawab terhadap semua aspek lingkungan yang ada di job site untuk memastikan PT Freeport Indonesia mematuhi semua peraturan undangan yang berlaku di bidang lingkungan. Ilmu yang saya pelajari banyak saya gunakan karena salah satu aspek yang dilakukan oleh PT Freeport Indonesia adalah melakukan kegiatan pengelolaan dan pemantauan di ekosistem pesisir.
Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science offering some programs, including international and national programs, and we challenge you to explore our fisheries and marine science resources. So, be proudly to welcome you to our Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to welcome to the Honorable, the Dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, Professor Dr. Insinyur Triwinarni Agustini, MSc PhD. The Honorable, our great speaker for today's international seminar, Professor Lee Baumgartner. The Honorable, our great speaker for today's international seminar, Dr. Fufi An. The Honorable, our moderator for today's international seminar, Dr. Insinyur Frida Purwanti, MSc. And welcome to our beloved participants. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the international seminar with the topic of fish migration management, how to be successful and sustainable. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sultan, and I am a student from resource management, from Aquatic Resource Management in Diponegoro University. It is an honor and pleasure moment for me to be your master of ceremony for this precious event. First of all, let's thank to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has been giving us guidance, health, happiness, and mercy, so we can attend and participate in this event without any obstacles. praise and salutation upon our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the best figure in this universe, who brought us to the life of life and to the right path. Before we go to the next agenda, I would like to read the whole agenda for this event. For the committee, please share the agenda. As you can see here, our agenda is on 9 o'clock until 9:15, the opening and overview of FPIK Undip. From 9:15 to 9:30, welcome from Dean of FPIK Undip. From 9:30 to 9:40, introduction to international seminar. From 9:40 to 10:25, points of seminar online, fish migration management, how to be successful and sustainability. From 10:25 to 11:10, points of seminar online, diadromy in a large tropical river in Mekong. From 11:10 to 11:50, we have a discussion session. And from 11:50 to 12 o'clock, we have a closing session. Next, I would like to invite all of our ladies and gentlemen to sit properly and steady to hear Indonesian national anthem. Thank you. Next, I will read the rule for this event. For the committee, please share the rules. The first rule is the seminar is held through two channels. There are Zoom and YouTube. For participants who have difficulty logging into Zoom can switch to YouTube. For the stability of the internet connection, participants' video and audio are automatically turned off and will be pleased to turn on in the photo or discussion session. In discussion session, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom to ask questions. Those who want to be conveyed directly can use the raise hand feature. For participants who are present on YouTube can text question on live chat. The attendance link will be shared through the chat menu on Zoom and live chat on YouTube during this event. Participants must attach proof of attendance or screenshot of Zoom or YouTube subscribe. Before we go to the next agenda, I would like to inform you about our participants today. For the committee, maybe you can share our participants. As you can see here, our participants mostly came from University of Diponegoro, and the other participants came from Charles Sturt University, IPB University, and etc. To begin this event, we will hear a warm speech from our Dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, Professor Dr. Insinyur Tri Winarni Agustini, MSc, PhD. To Professor Tri Winarni, time and screen are yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I would like to give thanks and to our distinguished speakers who have joined this morning. So good morning, Prof. Lee Baumgartner from Charles Sturt University, Australia. Good morning, Prof. Lee. Hello.
Selamat pagi. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you. And the second one is our distinguished speaker, Dr. Fufian from the Research Institute for Aquaculture, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Good morning, Dr. Fufian. And also all of the participants joining the general lecture for this morning. And this is really our appreciation for the topic that delivered for this morning about the fish migration management, which concern on how to be successful and sustainable. This is our challenge that nowadays Indonesian government has developed a massive infrastructure, especially for building the connectivity between the islands that provide with the toll roads. This is to be a better connectivity, a better access for any activities that promote development of our economics, and also regarding to the development of fisheries and marine subject. So this instruction, of course, will give an impact on the reducing, especially for the fish in Indonesia, especially for inland water, because the fish migration route will be disturbed. So by choosing the topic for this morning, I think it is very useful for all of us, Prof. Lee and Dr. Fufian, who have a really related subject that can be shared the knowledge and discuss what happened with the Indonesian, especially regarding with the fish migration management to be better for the future. And yesterday, we also have a general lecture talking about the sea eel, that also may be related to the fish migration as well. So I think that all of the participants really expect to have a very fruitful discussion for this morning, with inviting Prof. Lee and Dr. Fufian to be the keynote speaker. So this time also I would like to thanks to the moderator, Dr. Vika Purwanti, as well as to the head of department, Dr. Suryanti, and of course the committee that have been prepared everything for conducting this event. So not much, but first of finally I would like to inform that this activity of course also support the key performance indicator for our faculty, especially, and of course for Diponegoro University in general, by inviting and involving these two, we can support our key performance indicator. So it is also very useful for all of us. So have a very fruitful discussion for this morning, and I think this we expect that not over. We can continue for the future collaboration with these two keynote speakers. Maybe next time we can have offline meet with you both of you to come to our faculty. Thank you very much. So, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Tri Winarni Agustini, for the warm speech. Move on to the next agenda. We will have a photo session. I would like to invite to all of our participants to open their camera so we can take the photo session. Okay, I think all of our participants already opened the camera, so I think we can take the photo. For the committee, get ready to take the photo. I'll count from 3, 2, 1. Once again, I'll count from 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you for our participants today. Before we move to the main session, I would like to read our moderator's CV. For the committee, please share the CV. Okay, as you can see here, it is a biography from our moderators today, Dr. Engineer Frida Purwanti, MSc. Her educations are Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, Universitas Diponegoro, Center for Coastal Management, Southern Coast University, Study Program, Natural Resources and Environmental Management, Institut Pertanian Bogor. Her research interests are conservation science, ecotourism, social ecology, and sustainable development. Her experiences are SATREP Blue Cares Project, Ecosystem Service Assessment and Blue Carbon Ecosystem, Socio-Ecology Team, ITROSCO, Coastal Community and Ecosystem Service, the 24th International Conference of Human Ecology, Linking Coastal Ecosystem and Human Wellbeing, and UN Decade Conference, Marine Life 2030, Increasing Our Knowledge of Marine Biodiversity in Indo-West Pacific Region for Better Conservation and Management. And now, we will move on to our main session, which will be led by our moderator. Hello, Mrs. Frida. Are you ready, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. For Mrs. Frida, time and screen are yours.
Okay, thank you, Sultan. Okay, thanks to all of the attendants for this international seminar. Good morning, all of you. Hope you are in a happy and healthy also. Welcome to today's international seminar on the topic of fish migration management, how to be successful and sustainable. We know that migratory behavior of fish in the cycle of their life is a regular phenomenon, and there is a trigger by various factors. And we know also that fish is always moving, flowing to find their food, a place to swim, or to escape for the predator is in order to be survived. Considering all of that could affect fish migratory, so we can conserve fish and also their habitat. This is one of our concern of this study program to conduct this seminar. So we here we have our honorable guest, Prof. Lee Gardner from the Charles Sturt University, Australia, and also Dr. Phu Phi An from Research Institute of Aquaculture, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Here I am Frida Prawanti, will be the moderator for this international seminar today. Okay. Let me inform that this presentation will going on in 2.5 hours. And for each speaker, will have time 45 minutes to present their speech. During this presentation, all the audience can also freely ask a question by typing in the chat box. But first, put your name and your institution first. Okay, we will open this seminar. We will ask Mr. Lee to come. And before that, I will read his bio, please. Here. Prof. Lee Jason Baumgartner is from Charles Sturt University, Australia. The current position is a professor in fisheries and river management and also a director and board member of the Northeast Catchment Management Authority. He has taken his bachelor degree from Deakin University and also got his Doctor of Philosophy from University of Canberra. He has many experience. Here we can see is from the National Geographic Documentary. Is also representing Australia at the Global Island Fisheries and a chair association for sustaining diver fisheries also. So on. Next, please. Next, please. He has okay. Actually, Prof. Lee has also many experience. He has worked for 20 years in fisheries field. He has experience from initiating, leading, and also developing innovative research. He have won many competitive research grants over $90 million in the last decade. Okay, for the next, I think we will give time for Prof. Lee to give his presentation on fish migration management, how to be successful and sustainable. Now, Prof. Lee, it's yours.
Thank you, Frida. I appreciate the opportunity today, and thank you everyone for devoting your generous time today to learn a little bit about migratory fish. I will just share my screen and hopefully everything will be okay. Can everybody see an orange screen there?
Yeah.
Excellent. So the work I will present today is I guess, is focused on Southeast Asia, and a lot of the work that we have been doing over the last 20 years, focusing on the Mekong, has recently been adapted to many of the rivers and streams in Indonesia. And today I thought I might give a little bit of a regional story of fish migration and why it is important, and some of the work that we are currently doing with some of your colleagues in Indonesia. So hopefully everyone will enjoy the story we tell today. Try to advance my slide here. So I'd like to start this story about food security, because we talk about fish from a biodiversity perspective quite often in the ecology of fish, but really in many of the areas where I've been working, fish are an important part of the diets of people. And as a global population increases, we're going to see a lot more competition for food, not just food as in grain that's grown, but also fish that are caught from rivers. And in areas where fish are an important food source, we're also seeing that not only are there food security issues, there's water security issues. And in order to have a healthy fishery, particularly an inland fishery, you need healthy water systems as well, and you need water systems which are safe for the fish, but are also safe for people to drink. And so the work that we do when we think about fish migration works at this intersection of food security and water security and trying to achieve healthy rivers. As I mentioned, the world's population is increasing, and we have a challenge globally over the next 30 years to try and find a way to make sure that we have enough food for 9 billion people to eat. And when we think about the types of protein that people eat, and when I move into this next figure, the world's global population is very unequal. And this figure's been shown several times now, but it gives an interesting perspective. Is that circle that's on the global graph now, there's more people that live within that circle than live outside the circle. And if you think about what many of those people are dependent upon, a large proportion of people within there depend on rice as the main grain that they use for food security. But in terms of the source of protein and micronutrients, a large proportion of people in that circle also like to eat fish. And so the work that we do as ecologists and engineers are trying to make sure that we sustainably develop our food and water systems in a way that makes sure that the main sources of protein are protected. So that gives a global sort of perspective of the work that we do. And from here on in, I'm going to give 4 key points about the different, I guess, about the migratory ecology of fish and how that's relevant in this global food system. And so the first key point I would like to get across to everyone is that all fish are important and all fish migrate. And it doesn't matter what type of fish they are or what life history stage, whether they are a larvae, whether they are a juvenile fish, or whether they are an adult fish, there is some need to move in and among different habitats to sustain a healthy fishery. And so fish are really important, and I like to say fish are important from a biodiversity perspective. There are over 40,000 species of fish globally, freshwater fish, and they're in decline, very much so in decline. In most continents, they are in decline. And so a lot of the work we are trying to do is to try and arrest these declines. And it doesn't matter if you're in Southeast Asia or the Murray-Darling Basin, which is an area here in Australia, or in New Zealand. Here are some pictures of New Zealand, or in Indonesia. Freshwater fish are very diverse, very wonderful species, and we always, and people connect with them. Indonesia in particular is a biodiversity hotspot for freshwater fish, and there are only a few biodiversity hotspots for fish globally. There's one here in Indonesia, in the Indo-Pacific, also in South America, in the Amazon region. They're very, very biodiverse areas for fish, and so there's really important reasons to protect our inland fisheries. There's cultural connections with fish, so people connected with fish for thousands of years as a food source, in ceremonies, in storytellings and narratives. Fish are really important parts of people's culture, and more recently, economically, they become important from a commercial perspective, but also from a recreational perspective. There are now tourism industries which are established across the region for which the fish. So fish are, by definition, and I'm a fish ecologist, so I'm a little biased, fish are important. Now, if we look in Southeast Asia, fish and rice production are 2 of the most important systems that we see. And quite often we see that the development of rice systems can come at the cost of fish, and I'll talk a little later on in terms of how that happens and ways we can mitigate that. But for the majority of my talk today, I'll be focusing on productive rice and fish systems and finding ways to make both coexist. But first, in order to understand how that rice-fish interaction works, let's talk a little bit about animal movements. And most people will recognize and connect with the fact that big animals move. It doesn't matter if you're whales moving in the ocean, or if you're large animals, say, moving across the African plain or the bison in North America. There's lots of stories of big animal movements globally. And it doesn't have to be big mammals. It can be birds. And there's been a lot of work recently talk about flyways, this flyway concept for birds. We know that birds fly very long distances across their life, and there's flyways which connect continents that fish move. But people don't very rarely think about this from a fish perspective. And only recently, the concept of a swimway has been developed. And if you look at most of the continents and most of the river systems in the world, they are important swimways for fish. Fish need to move around these river systems to spawn, to feed, to access new habitat, to access dry or refuge habitat in the dry season. So in most river systems, fish are not just moving from place to place over a small distance. These are very big, large-scale movements in freshwater systems, and they're very important to protect if you wish to sustain fish as a food system. So some examples of swimways, I guess, in our region. There's fish that move around the area around between Indonesia, New Guinea, Australia. There's fish that move around this system here, and that's a fairly connected system from a fishery perspective. I'll talk about the Pacific eel a little later on. They are very connected at a very big, over very big distances, and cannot complete their life history if you interrupt those distances. We have coastal fish in Australia which move up and down coastal systems. That's important for feeding and spawning. We have inland fish which move in inland systems that don't need to connect with the ocean but still have connections that they need. And so the point here is that when you talk about swimways for different fish, it depends on the species and it depends on the scale at which they move. And I mentioned that I'd like to talk about eels because eels are a really interesting species, and eels are also a really important species, not only in Indonesia, but also in Australia as well. In fact, any country where there's eels, they have an interesting story. And so eels are really important because they have to move between the ocean and freshwater during their lifestyle. They go out to the ocean to breed, they return to the rivers where they grow to adults, and then they head back out to the ocean to breed again. And this is a cycle that must be completed if you're an eel. Now, it's really difficult to track how far eels move because they go so far offshore. They go thousands of kilometers into the ocean once they leave their river systems. And this is a graph here of a study that was recently completed in Australia where they tagged some migrating eels with satellite tags. So they tracked their movements with satellites. And these fish went all the way from Victoria in southern Australia here. You can see, if you can see my cursor, and they migrated out to New Caledonia. So these were oceanic migrations of almost 2,000 kilometers. There, those fish died. So we presume that they spawned and then died. And then the larvae then traveled down the East Australian ocean currents and they settle into rivers as glass eels. And so it's a really interesting life cycle because they need the fresh and seawater connections to survive. And it's similar in Indonesia. So Eastern Indonesian eels are thought to move out into the Northern Pacific Ocean as far as Japan for their spawning migrations. And so these are eels that have significant economic importance for people who catch the glass eels. They can be sold for up to $5,000 per kilogram. But these fish function over very enormous scales. And so I guess the point of these examples was to think that just because you catch a fish in a river doesn't mean it has lived its entire life in the river. You're going to hear some wonderful examples about that from Vivian's talk, which is coming up. So fish are important, and fish migrate was the first point that I was hoping to get across. Now, secondly, is that if we develop our rivers, and these are particularly for fish that move over long distances, we can have a very significant impact on fish. And ideally, if we look at Australia and New Zealand, this is what an undeveloped system should look like. Very long flowing rivers going either inland or out to the coast, fish happily moving up and down those rivers and doing what fish do. However, in order to provide water security, this is the water security issue that I was talking about before, we've developed our rivers. We develop our rivers by building dams to store water and redistribute water for drinking purposes. We may dam rivers for hydropower to create electricity. We may simply build a bridge over a river, and that may become a barrier to fish movements. We may build pipe culverts or earthen block banks for flood mitigation, and that can create barriers for fish movements. So the more and more we modify our rivers for human needs, the more and more we impact our fish. This is a figure here of the large dams which were built on rivers over the last, say, 120 to 130 years. Significant amounts of development in North America, Australia as well, China, you can see, Europe, some in South America. And so that's led to the ability to capture significant amounts of water, but it's also blocked many of our rivers. And if we look forward to some of the areas of the world where dams are still being constructed, we can see that in Australia and America, not so many dams being constructed anymore. In fact, in America now, they are starting to remove dams that are no longer needed. So dam removal is, but significant dam development in South America, but also in Southeast Asia. We're continuing to build dams, particularly for hydropower and for town water. So there's still a lot of pressure on fisheries. And if we think about the circle I drew earlier, we're building a significant amount of barriers to fish movement in the areas where people depend on fish as a food source. Now, it's not just dams, also small irrigation weirs can block fish. And so this is a map of the Murray-Darling Basin and also a map of New Zealand, where the dots on these maps are barriers to fish migration, which are less than 6 meters high. So these are quite small barriers, and you might call them irrigation weirs or regulators. But in the example on the left, you almost join the dots on those rivers and you can connect the rivers. A very heavy development. And if I move to the Mekong, which is an area where I've done a lot of work, the amount of irrigation weirs which are already built or are planned to be built is very significant. And so these are occurring in areas where fish need to migrate to complete parts of their life cycle, and also in areas where people depend on fish as a food source. And we've seen that when we develop rivers, it's led to declines. This is a graph of the Murray-Darling Basin Murray cod commercial fishery. We started to develop the rivers for irrigation in around the 1930s, 1940s, and it didn't take too long after the river development commenced for the commercial fishery to collapse. And that fishery has been closed. It closed in the late 1990s and was no longer commercially viable. If we look at America, and in America, there's these charismatic movements of salmon. Everyone talks about salmon migrations going from the ocean up to the freshwaters to breed. Once they started to develop the Columbia River in America for hydropower, the salmon migrations collapsed, and the number of salmon that were caught absolutely collapsed as well. And so we saw it in Australia, we saw it in America, and we're now starting to see this in Indonesia as well. And so there's some areas in Indonesia where eels, which require access to fresh water for their glass eels and for the adult eels, we're starting to see very big declines in eel production in some rivers. And so it doesn't matter if it's Indonesia, Australia, America, Europe, South America, when we block the migrations of fish, it does impact the productivity of the fishery. And it doesn't actually mean fish need to migrate upstream. And I just want to make this point as well before we move on to the next area. It can impact fish moving downstream. And these are some photos here of eels, which were migrating downstream on their spawning migration and interacted with hydropower turbines. Now, eels, because they are such a long animal, if they move through a spinning blade that's spinning very fast, it has a very low chance of getting through without being struck by a blade. So when we think about fish migration, you can think about, many people think about upstream movements of fish, but fish also need to move downstream. And if you block the important downstream movements of eels, that means they will not return to the ocean to breed, and you will not see a good return in glass eels in the following years. So just to make sure that everyone's thinking upstream and downstream. So that's a pretty doom and gloom, horrible story, but there are solutions to try and help mitigate the impacts of river development. So the key third point I'd like to talk about today is that it is possible to reconstruct swimways, and fishways are a solution that we're currently progressing in Indonesia, and I'll give some examples of those now. So if a fishway, or a fish ladder, sometimes they're called, is basically a channel which is around a barrier. And you can see it, there's an interesting picture there. It's a concrete channel which is built around a dam and a weir which a fish can swim up. Tangga ikan, I believe, is the Indonesian term. And so we've been doing some work with our Indonesian colleagues to try and develop this technology for application to rivers in Indonesia where migratory fish might be at threat. But further to my previous discussion, we have to think about the entire life cycle. Now, this is a life cycle of a fish in Australia, which is called a golden perch. And we know that these golden perch will lay their eggs and the eggs will drift downstream with the current. So we need to protect the eggs when they drift with the current. That's a form of migration. We then have these larvae, they hatch out into tiny larvae, 2 millimeters, and they go looking for nursery habitat. We have to protect the movement from the hatching site to the nursery habitat. Then they grow into juvenile fish. They're not breeding fish yet, they're juvenile fish which need to eat and grow big. We need to protect that habitat where they go to feed. Then when they grow into spawning adults, we need to protect the areas where they grow to spawn, and that cycle repeats. So we have to think about eggs, we have to think about larvae, we have to think about juveniles, and we have to think about adults when we think about fish migration mitigation. Now, for adult fish, I mentioned we can build fish ladders, and this is an example of what a fish ladder may look like. This is a nature-like rock ramp fishway, which has been built out of rocks, but they're not all nature-like fish passes. We may have fish passes which are built out of concrete, and this is an example of a vertical slot fishway. And you can see it's the same principle. It creates a channel around the barrier, and fish can move upstream to move. You can see on this particular weir, there's a notch in the weir where fish may want to move downstream as well. And there's a range of different designs of fish ladders that exist, but it doesn't matter which particular design you select for a site. There are some essential components of a fish pass which are needed to pass fish. First, the fish will approach from downstream or from upstream if they're moving downstream. There's this approach phase. There is then an entry phase where the fish must find the entrance. And so the entrance of a fishway, you can see here's a downstream entrance, here's an upstream entrance, both very important. The design of the fishway itself must suit the swimming abilities of the fish. So you must understand at some stage how strong the fish are able to swim. And then you need to make sure that when the fish swim and continue their migration, it's done in an unimpeded way. There are already some examples in Indonesia of fish ladders or fishways. This is an example at Pejaya Dam in South Sumatra on the Komering River. The fish ladder is here and has been fitted to this irrigation diversion weir. That's another picture here of the fish ladder, and you can see here the fish ladder on the left-hand side has been designed for the fish to move up. And quite a few people say, okay, well, this is a fish ladder, but how does it work? So we worked with our colleagues in Indonesia to develop a video. So I'd like to share just a very brief 1-minute video on how the fish ladder at Pejaya Dam actually functions. And so this area here is the entrance of the fish ladder, and we say fish will swim into the fish ladder, and they then need to make their way upstream. And so you can see these concrete walls here are called baffles. And the idea of the concrete wall is to break the very big step of a dam, which may be several meters, into a series of smaller steps that fish can actually swim through. And this one here at Pejaya Dam is what we call an orifice fishway. And so the fish will actually swim through these small tunnels, or orifices as they are called. And they move through those and continue their migrations. And now this particular structure can pass fish both upstream and downstream. And the fish can either go under the orifice or they can swim over the top of the baffle through that small waterfall there. And so this is just a smaller example of how these structures work and how they are being already deployed in waterways in Indonesia. And why this is relevant, and one of the challenges we've had in the work we have done and this is an example of some projects in Lao PDR, is where many of the structures which have been built, these are dams and weirs which were built 30, 40 years ago, are now need to be replaced. they've reached the end of their effective life. And so we've been working with donor bodies and aid agencies to improve some of the existing structures. And so these are some examples where we've seen old sites here which are into disrepair and need to be repaired, and they've been rebuilt in ways which are more friendly for fish. And so these are just some before-after photos of ways we have improved migration outcomes for fish and tried to reinstate swimways at sites where they have been blocked. And in some of these sites, we've seen fishermen start to catch fish that they said they have not caught for many years. And so when you have many of these weirs at a landscape scale, you think that building one fish ladder at one site is not enough. You have to think about this at the whole of catchment scale and try to connect your solutions up. And this is because now that golden perch that I talked about before, that we had to think about the larvae and the adults and the juveniles, when those fish move, they're moving over very big scales. So up to 2,300 kilometers, which is the longest migration we've noticed for this species. So we actually need to not only think about the site where the fish migration has been blocked, we have to think about rehabilitating the entire river system and trying to make sure that people who need access to these fish as a food source can access them at scale. So the final key point that I wanted to talk about is that sometimes, whilst it's good to build these fish ladders and reinstate fishways, sometimes it's not quite enough. You have to do a little bit more. And when you're thinking about these dynamic rice fish systems, so revisiting these rice fish systems is quite often we see rice systems built on floodplains. The reasons they are built on floodplains is because they are very rich in nutrients. And the reason they are rich in nutrients is because they regularly flood. And it's a really important part of the fish's life cycle because floodplains are often the nursery areas for fish. For the larvae that I talked about earlier, but also the juvenile fish, they get a lot of food from these floodplain areas. And in areas where they've now been developed for rice production, we're trying to implement solutions to reconnect fish with those systems and get win-win benefits for both rice farmers and for fisheries. And so we think about not only now as a single site, we think about making a biodiverse landscape and thinking about implementing solutions at a landscape scale that ensures that you can have multi-use fisheries or multi-use ecosystems. And that generally requires more than just fish ladders to be the solution that you apply. You might have to have sustainable floodgates. We might have to control fishing in the area. You may have to have sustainable aquaculture facilities. You may need to do habitat rehabilitation and link up a whole range of different solutions at the landscape scale to think about fish. Because remember, we're trying to think about fish from the egg all the way to the adult. In Australia, some of the solutions that we might apply are putting habitat back into the river. We call them snags or wood or areas that fish may breed. Areas where there's irrigation offtakes, we found that irrigation offtakes can take many thousands of fish per day into the irrigation system and they're lost from the river. So we've started putting screens on areas where irrigation water is taken to keep fish in the main rivers. We might do environmental flows. So we may actually release flows from dams specifically for fish to stimulate spawning events or to stimulate fish migration events. We might build bypasses around dams or fish ladders. And in this case here, this is an eel bypass, which has been set up to pass eels upstream to the upstream habitat. In areas where fish have declined a lot, you may actually need to breed them and restock them into rivers. And that's something that's happening all over the world. Also in areas where there are that invasive species which have invaded, you may actually have to remove them as well, because sometimes a fish ladder can pass an invasive species. You may actually need to remove them from the river. And if you think about that in an integrated way, you can actually start to think about how do we integrate our farmlands, our rice areas, and our rivers for sustainable solutions. And there are a large number now of these technical solutions which can be applied at a landscape scale if you integrate this into the planning process, which actually helps fish and also helps farmers at the same time. Because we say that in order to have a healthy fishery, you need a healthy river, and in order to have healthy communities, you need healthy water systems. And so achieving this food insecurity and water insecurity issue can be helped by the application of technical solutions. So the key points from the presentation I was hoping to get to today, if we walk away with 4 key points, is number 1, that all freshwater fish are important and need to move, and that the way we develop our rivers is impacting these fish. There are solutions available, whether it be fish ladders or a range of other solutions. And if we deploy them sustainably at a catchment scale and integrate them as solutions, we can have productive food systems and healthy rivers, which is the goal. I'd like to acknowledge the many partners that we have. I'd particularly like to acknowledge our Indonesian partners who have been along us with this journey, particularly the work that we are doing in Indonesia with hydropower and irrigation systems. And I would also like to thank you all for listening today, and I hope that you found this interesting and look forward to seeing you all in Indonesia sometime soon. I'm very happy to take questions and say terima kasih.
Okay, terima kasih, Prof. D. This is a interesting speech here. We know that all of the fish should be protected for their migration from all of these life cycles. See? And now we will ask for the second speaker first, Dr. Fu Fian, who will give speech about diadromy in the Mekong River. As we know that diadromy is a predictable migration between marine and freshwater environment that certain species should undertake during their specific period in their life. So please welcome Dr. Fu Pian. To the participant who will ask about Prof. Lee lecture, you can ask any question in the chat box. Please.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to share my finding about my study. Yeah, I'm going to talk about diadromy in the Mekong River, fish species that migrate between fresh and marine waters. Actually, this is my summary of my PhD study. I just finished my study at the Charles Uni, and Professor Lee, my supervisor. So yeah, I'm lucky to have to work with him. Further, talk a little bit about the Mekong River. This is a river run through 6 countries, started in China and then flow downstream about 5,000 kilometers to the sea. And the Mekong River plays a very important role in terms of food security and employment for million people in the region. And we harvest about 2.5 million tons per year, just in the lower Mekong Basin. And the capture fishery contribute an important part to the local economy. For example, like fishery in Cambodia contribute about 18% to the national GDP, and followed by Laos with 13%, Vietnam and Thailand with a small percentage, about 2% to the GDP. Yeah, here are some more figures about the Mekong River. The Mekong River are home to about 1,200 fish species, and most of them are small size, as you see in the pictures. They produce about 4.4 million tons of fish every year. Half of them maybe come from capture fishery and another half come from aquaculture. And about 2/3 of population participate in fishing, and mainly about part-time fishing. Full-time fishing just take a very small part of the population. And each person consume about 63 kilo of fish per year, so that we rely on fishery resources. It's very important in terms of food security. Yeah, I said the Mekong River are home to about over 1,000 fish species, and 8% of them are under endangered at different level. Here below are some species under critical endanger like Mekong catfish, giant bass, and some other species. They are iconic species of the Mekong River, and some of them can reach to over 300 kilos, so it's really big. And 3% of the Mekong species are near crescent, and 36 under less concern, and over 50% of the Mekong are not evaluated or data deficient. So a lot of work remains for scientists. This map on the right show about fish migration. They migrate different direction between seasons. For example, in the lower system, fish tend to migrate upstream during the dry season for spawning, and larvae and broodstock are then moved downstream for feeding in the Mekong Delta, then wait for the next seasons. The map on the left shows spawning ground. You can see many species that spawn. The large yellow dot. You can see a picture in that's located in the confront in this area. So it is an amazing area, especially for sampling migratory fish. Many fish they trying to get upstream and get caught by fishers. So there are one special job you can see only in this region. I think I will show you in the next slide. This is the waterfall located in the mainstream of the Mekong River, and local fishers they build some chaff further downstream, like this. So fish tend to migrate upstream. However, the water current is so strong, so once they get exhausted, cannot migrate further upstream. So they will creep downstream and fall into this trap. And fishers do an easy job. They just stay there and collecting fish. Fishers can stay overnight there to color fish if needed. You can see a little tent at the back. Yeah, they can stay there overnight. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about diatomy. What I mean by that, diatomous fish are those species need to migrate between fresh and marine waters to complete their life cycle. They are also divided into three subtypes. The first one is anadromous, like North American salmon. They live in the ocean but migrate back to river for spawning. The second one is catadromous, like eel, angular eel. It is the opposite way, live in freshwater but spawn in the ocean. And the last one is amphichromous. They migrate between fresh and marine water but not for the purpose of breeding. So it comes up to the first question, like which Mekong species need to connect to marine waters, and are they diatomous? So the first step of my study is to review existing information to answer this question. Yeah, for the Mekong River, as I mentioned earlier, about over 1,000 species. So here is my finding. So for the first question, like connection between fresh and marine waters, I found that 57% of Mekong fish species distribute only in fresh water. This surprised me a bit, as I thought this percentage should be very high, but I found only 57%. And the most surprised me is that 11% of Mekong fish present in 3 different environments, like in freshwater, brackish water, and marine waters. And 9% they distribute in fresh and brackish waters. So they are potential for diatomous species. So the next step is I'm going to refine this list. And I found that about 9% of Mekong fish species, we think that they are diatomous. And this species contribute about 5% of total feed production. This percentage is quite small, but they are very high valuable species. So 5% is quite small, but in terms of value, it's very high. The limitation of this finding is I rely on local knowledge. Very few species will confirm they are diatomous, or most of them based on local knowledge. So it comes up to the next question is how to confirm a fish species is diatomous or they connect to marine waters. So I select some species for my study to confirm their connection to marine waters. Here are potential methods that can be used to answer my question. There are about 10 methods available to understand fish life cycle or life history. And I found that otolith microchemistry is one of the best options. You may hear about otolith or ear bones, a calcified structure located in the fish head, just next to the brain. And you can see in the picture on the right, some species have big otoliths, so it's easy to find, and other species have smaller one. But in general, you can find it and remove otolith after practicing few individual, and I'm sure everyone can do it. Like in my case, I didn't know about otolith when I start my PhD, so yeah, it takes some time. So now I can get familiar with this. This is a concept of otolith microchemistry. So this slide can help you understand more about this approach that I use to understand fish migration between fresh and marine waters. Here, as you see on the right-hand side over here, the concentration of strontium is very different between fresh and marine waters. It's very rich in marine, but very poor in fresh water. So this element is a good indicator for whether fish live in marine or live in fresh waters. So strontium in marine water is about 82 times higher in fresh water in the Mekong River. So on the left-hand side, it is an otolith. This otolith will observe elements from ambient waters as fish grow or migrate between habitats. So imagine that a fish was born in marine water, the yellow one, the top, the bottom over here. They migrate to freshwater in river. They migrate to freshwater in river and finally return to marine waters. So let's have a look when fish move and then how element observed in otolith. Yeah, I hope this slide can help you understand more about my study. This is the concept of otolith microchemistry. So otolith act like flight recorder. We can extract information in otolith, and then this information can help us to answer many ecological questions like fish migration. And I found that this it is a very powerful approach for you to understand about fish migration, especially in the Mekong River. So my next step is to sample and analyze water chemistry in the Lower Mekong Basin. It covers about 2,000 kilometer long from very far upstream to the sea. So this is what I found. I analyzed about 10 elements, and I found that 2 elements, they are associated with salinity very well. You can see strontium is closely proportional to salinity. It's very high in the sea and very low in the river. And barium is opposite but more variable. And literature also show that the 2 elements, strontium and barium, are good indicators for freshwater and marine water. So I'm going to use the 2 elements, especially for the first one, for the strontium, for my study. Then I'm going to remove otoliths and then set them in resin and cut a thin section, then polishing until the core is exposed. Then the section will be used to analyze some key elements, especially for strontium, the first element. There are 2 types of machine that I use in my study. The most common one is laser ablation ICP-MS. This can analyze a transect usually from the core to the egg of otoliths. The second one is scanning X-ray fluorescent microscopy. It's similar to a scanner. So this can analyze the whole otolith section like the 2-dimensional map. So in this presentation, I also show the second machine, the scanning X-ray fluorescent microscopy. Here are my finding. The first species I look at is the Mekong catfish, Pangasius cramfish. The upper picture is an otolith section, and below is the strontium variation across the otolith. The blue color indicates the concentration is very low, and the red indicates very high. The concentration of strontium is very high. You can see the blue color at the core. It indicates that they spawn in river, and the concentration increased substantially beyond the core. It indicates that they move to higher salinity, such as brackish water or Mekong estuaries. They clearly migrate to marine water, the red color, and finally they come back to river and being captured because the strontium concentration is low at the core of otoliths. Here are some more otoliths are analyzed. They are slightly different between individuals, but all of them show very low concentration of strontium at the core. It indicates that they all spawn in river, but they grow mainly in brackish or in marine waters. And now you take a closer look at one otolith. This one, I estimated that it's almost about 4 years old. They spawn in river, in freshwater. You can see the blue dot over here. Then they move to brackish water and stay there for probably about 2 years. Then they move like just move between fresh brackish or marine water, and you can see there are some blue ring over here. It may suggest that they migrate to river for spawning or feeding regularly. Another study looked at spawning location of the same species, Pangasius cramfish. but they analyze strontium isotope. So they also analyze strontium isotope from water, and they show on the map on the left. Then they analyze strontium isotope in otoliths, and they concluded that this species spawn in the Mekong's mainstream only, never in tributaries. And another one is they spawn in multiple locations along the Mekong mainstream. So it's really interesting. This species, they spawn only in the mainstream, not in the tributaries. So combine all the information, we can understand more about their migration, their life history. For this species, the Mekong catfish, they may distribute in the Mekong estuary. When they get mature, they migrate for about 1,000 kilometers to river for spawning. And it is a very long way, 1,000 kilometers for spawning ground and another 1,000 kilometers back to the feeding ground in the Mekong estuary. A map on the right is the Mekong mainstream dams. So a yellow one, the yellow area is the main spawning area, but at least one dam is built and 2 dams are planning to build. I think they may not able to get to the spawning if all of the dam are built without any mitigation like fish passage Dr. Lee just mentioned. And here another species I look at this, the anguilla eel. You may heard, I think you know about this species, but in the Mekong River, it's not very common. So very few species, very few individuals I can record it in this river. It's very rare, and it becomes rarer and rarer. And autolytic microchemistry you can see the strontium at the bottom over here. So you can see the red dot, this is the core. So it indicates that they spawn in the ocean or in marine water, and then they migrate to river and for feeding. And they remain in river, no connection to the sea after that. I sample some eel in river, but one of them are really big, about 6 kilograms. But autolytic microchemistry show that they migrate to river and remain there. They don't migrate back to the sea at all. The third species I look at this, the gray eel catfish. I found 4 migration strategies. The first pattern is accounted for about 24%. They live in flat water and no connection to bracket or marine water at all. You can see the first one, it's on blue. And the concentration is very low. It indicates they live on year round in the river. And the second and the third one, they live in bracket or in marine waters and migrate between flat and marine waters. And the fourth pattern is really interesting. They spawn, it's likely they spawn in bracket water. You can see the yellow dot at the core. It means they spawn in bracket water and then they move to flat water for some time, the blue area, then finally return to bracket waters. This species is surprised me very much. I didn't expect this species, they have multiple migration strategy. Yeah, I'm very excited about my finding. And I think everyone, we thought that everyone have a single migration strategy, but they have multiple migration strategies. So in summary, the Mekong fishery play an important role for food and employment for million local people. Each year we harvest about 2.5 million tons from the wild, and many species are long-distance migratory species. Migratory species contribute about 37% of total production. However, many dams exist and many more dams are planning to build. These dams will totally block their migration routes, and feed passage is one solution that Dr. Lee just talked about. Yeah, here on the left-hand side is my supervisors, and people on the right who helped me a lot in terms of sampling during the COVID period, and some my sponsor for my study. So I'm really appreciate their support and their help, and hope this presentation can you find interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fufian. I'm sorry I'm not introduce you from your bio. So maybe I will ask the committee to share your CV plus, please. Sorry, here. Dr. Fufian is come from Research Institute for Aquaculture, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. He's taken his Bachelor of Aquaculture from the College of Aquaculture and Fisheries, and also he got Master of Applied Science from Australian Maritime College, and last is a Doctor of Philosophy from Charles Sturt University. He now is a Vice Head of Fisheries Ecology and Aquatic Resource Division at Research Institute for Aquaculture in Vietnam. Oh, sorry, this is an employment history, and he experienced for the hand-on training on tagging for the Mekong fish, and also on mangrove aquaculture socio-economic ecosystem. Okay, now we go to the discussion session. Okay, we will ask for all the participants to give your question here. You can raise your hand and unmute your camera. Unmute your microphone and open your camera. I see here from Dr. Taufik, SPG. It's time, no? Dr. Taufik?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Professor Lee and Dr. An. Yeah, this is really good ones. Well, probably I did evaluate the eel migration by evaluating phylogenetic pattern of eel, especially for Angula bicolor from West and East Indian Ocean. We have evaluated from Central Java, sample from Java and West Java, and then Sumatra for East Indian. So while the West Indian is from Madagascar, Mayotte, Reunion, and Seychelles as West Indian. I have found they have two clades, and each clade have some monophyletic bonds. From this bond, our closest sample in monophyletic bonds, I therefore recognize as the most recent common ancestor, and of course also as a panmetic reproduction fact. This is the fact, kind of panmetic reproduction fact. So as some studies mention that the eel spawning ground are in Massarin Ridge along the eastern Madagascar Ocean, and of course in Indonesia in along the off-west Sumatra, along the trends of Mentawai from Siberut to south of Paga Island. From the spawning location, I can measure the migration lobe of Angula bicolor where they categorize as maybe mid and long distant migratory species. Well, I measure about 1,000 to 3,000 for the migratory distance species, and long as to from 5 to 8,800 kilometers. And I haven't measured from the inland itself, maybe 10 kilometers. So the bicolor it's maybe very long. They have very long distance migration distance. So this is kind. Well, Dr. Lee, Dr. Ann, you saw that's the kind of Anguilla bicolor pacifica. Maybe that's coming from Vietnam in Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Wow, An, your Mekong fish might be from Indonesia. That would be really cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, eel in the Mekong River, it's very rare, and actually we don't know much about where they come from, and some of local fishers they get larvae from the central Vietnam, and then they transport to the Mekong River for grow out. So some fishers they do that, and they get very good profit. It's very high economic species, and I get one eel. It's very far upstream in the river, about over 1,000 kilometers, and I get that eel, and then it's somehow they didn't come back to marine water, and then they're happy there, and then they just stay there for their whole life. That's what I found.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah, roughly what I mean that we can use a certain methodology to measure the migration loop of the species itself. So by comparing the genetic, so the DNA itself, and then we can find the phylogenetic, and of course we can use the monophyletic bond itself. So maybe you have other comment for that one, Professor Lee?
It would be really interesting, because that the combination of the genetics of the populations with the ocean migrations and also the return to rivers is really critical for the eels. We don't really understand that well if they are connected across a landscape, or because some species will actually return to the same river. And so that some of the juvenile fish will return to the same river that the adults lived. And if that is the case, then protecting the glass eels from river development is critical. Otherwise, you will lose the whole population from the river.
Yeah. So because we also measure the age of the glass eel itself, and then we can find how long they will be drifted for the leptocephalus from the spawning to the inland recruitment. So they kind of my methodology.
Okay, thank you, Topik. Yeah, we share here. Okay, I will ask another participant. Is there any question? We already have two questions from Cristianto from Balai Taman Nasional Karimun Jawa, is a national park officer here, and also from Adam Prayuda, is an alumni from our study program. And Prof. Lee also has already answered the question. Is there any other? If no, I will ask to Dr. Fu. You said that fishes are multiple migrate strategy. It means that for one species or for any variety.
Yeah, the same species, but they have multiple migration strategy. Like one species I just talking about, the gray eel. I sample in further upstream. It maybe eat about 500 kilometers from the sea, and up there they don't migrate to connect to the sea, but some individual I record near in the Mekong Delta. It mean it likely near to the sea, so they likely to connect to brackish water for feeding or for spawning, and I think that if they live far away, so if they need to connect to brackish water, so they need to spend a lot of energy. So I think maybe that is the reason they don't like to migrate, because they think that maybe it's too fast or too risky, and they just stay there. And if they stay near to the estuary, so they're happy to migrate there for maybe for feeding, because food abundant or for spawning. So that's really interesting. The same species, but yeah, different migration strategies.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other question?
And for about the eel, so I found that the eel I found in the Mekong River, they don't connect to brackish water, but other study they found different pattern. I mean, some of them they just stay in brackish or in marine waters, and some eel they spawn in the ocean, migrate to the river for some time, and then come back to the ocean. Yeah, but my study, I record maybe very few eels, so maybe it not reflect the whole population.
Can I ask more, Dr. Frida?
Directly, please. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. An. So maybe the eel from Vietnam is maybe commonly they spawn in Marina Ridge, is closest to the Philippines, yeah, in Pacific area. So how many species actually that you have in Vietnam?
Yeah, we have only 2 species. The first one is Anguilla macmurata that I study, and another one is Anguilla bicolor. That species is very rare. It's maybe I just found
Bicolor Pacifica should be.
Yeah, that only species we record recently is Anguilla macmurata. Other species it's very rare.
Very rare. Okay. Yeah. Probably you can find my publication in EJAPS actually for that kind of migrations. Look, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I invite other participants. Okay. Dr. Lee, Prof. Lee, I want to ask about the fishway. Yeah. Should we find the best or suitable place to take to build a fishway? What should be some requirement for the river to build the fishway? It's different, as all we know that they go for upstream or downstream. It's for different species. Also, it's different type of fishway.
Thank you for the question, Bufrida. We try to build a fish ladder that passes as many fish as possible, and so the only areas where you may have a different fishway for a different fish is really eels. We've talked about them a lot. Eels need a special type of fish ladder, and so you can have fishways that pass other fish and eels, but if you build just what we call an eel way, it's very successful just for passing eels. the special requirements for the fish, we actually now, and earlier this year, we ran a masterclass in Bandung to talk about fishway design, and perhaps some people here were present at the masterclass. It's a very technical process. You need to have the knowledge of the fisheries ecology, the river hydrology, and also engineers which understand hydraulics. And by combining those three skill sets, you can then build an effective fishway. And the masterclass we ran in Bandung with help of FAO and BRIN, we actually did the process of what fish were at the site, which fish were migrating in different seasons,
And
what was the river flow, and then which ones did we pass. And so it was very successful, but it is quite technical, and it does require both fisheries people and engineers to work together to design a good fish ladder.
Okay, but the problem is the people who catch the fish, how go to migrate. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
they do.
That's what happened in
Yeah,
my country too.
Yeah. Well, Java River, so we have where, but they don't have any fish ladder or fishway anymore at the moment.
Okay. We have another question from Hugo Prakoso. Question for Professor Lee. Is it possible to reconstruct the dam if the dam is already been built without any fishway? Yeah.
It is. I just posted a reply. Yes, it's possible.
Okay.
We call it a retrofit.
Retrofit.
Yes, absolutely. It is a little bit more expensive after the dam is built because you have to build the fish ladder with no water. So you have to build a dam, a retaining dam around the site to make it dry. But it's possible. It's a little more expensive, and it's always much cheaper when you build a new dam. But right now we are working with the Department of Water Resources in West Java to build a fish ladder on the Cibereno River at Keringan. So Keringan will have a new fish ladder, and the weir is already built. So we can do this.
Okay, Prof. Lee. Okay, we still have time for another 8 minutes. Maybe we will ask another question. Okay. Okay. Any other question?
Yes,
To
probably.
the student. For my student from Aquatic Resource Management, you can ask question here.
What I would suggest, Bufrida, is that if any students are interested in fish ladders, they can certainly contact us. Also, we have many projects now in Indonesia, and if any students may be interested in a master's or a PhD on fish ladders, we would be really interested to talk to them, because the Australian government does provide many scholarships. So we are happy to welcome people interested in this area.
It's good news. Yeah. So
Probably,
we can contact you.
Probably, and Dr. An, can I have your email account, please? Yeah, so we can discuss directly.
Sure, yeah.
I think we have one more question in the chat box.
Yeah. Chat box question from Bofle. Yeah. Yeah, the question.
It's a really good question. It's a good question. Can fish affect the aquatic environment they pass through? It's really interesting, because this is one thing we would consider if we are going to design a fish ladder. There is a site near Sydney, in New South Wales, where we decided not to build a fish ladder, because if we did build the fish ladder, it would have taken a predatory fish into an area where there was a threatened fish. And if the predatory fish would have gone into that area, it would have eaten all of the threatened fish. So the migratory fish can very much affect the aquatic environment they pass through. And if there's areas where we don't want some predatory fish to go, we may decide not to build a fish ladder. It's a good question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mutia. And there's another question for Dr. Fufian. Could you elaborate the role of government to protect Mekong River? Yeah.
Yeah, I work in one institute belong to the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation, and yeah, my country we have not many projects about fishery management and assessment, and one channel you may heard about. It is the Mekong River Commission. It included in the Mekong country like Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand. So there are some components they specialize in. They monitor feed migration and or feed catch. So that one channel you may have a look, and then we can River Commission, the Mekong River Commission can invite or involve in the 4 countries.
Okay. Thank you. Because we know that watershed we have no boundary of nutrition, and we can also ask one question, the last question, before we close this seminar. Okay, Ilsan, also Patlan. We have 2 questions here. One for Dr. An. I have question about fish migration. How can freshwater fish migrate to seawater? How you explain about the dromus? And for Prof. Lee, do fish migrate in winter? And my second question, do predators like shark attack fish while migrating? It means that any other predator while fish move to upstream.
Yes, thank you for your question. Yeah, that question is it's very hard to me. Yeah, some river species actually I don't know why they live in the river, but they need to migrate to marine water for spawning or for feeding. But some literature say that they need to migrate because the food available, and also for larvae the spawning route is safer. So because predator they just stay away from the predator, and that's the way they survive and they improve their population. They just want to improve the population as soon as possible. And some species they have special migration strategy. They don't want to stay and then just hanging around and then find the best place to live and find another place to spawn. That sort of thing I can think of.
Okay.
I put Frida, I put some responses there, but it was a really interesting point of the study of the eel migration where they satellite tagged the migratory eels. During the day, the eels would go really deep, like almost 1 kilometer deep. This is like 1,000 meters. And then at night they would swim right back up to the surface. And any of the eels that didn't swim deep, they were eaten by the sharks. So we think it must have been a strategy for them to get away from the predators while they were doing the spawning migration. They go up and down really deep. The paper demonstrated that really, really strongly.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Ah. Okay, then we have time up for discussion session. So before I close this seminar, I would like to conclude our speech here that we know that all fish is migration here, and this is because they need to survive, yeah, and also they move between freshwater and seawater, or we also going up and down, and also go to another part, yeah, river, and also a significant impact for the freshwater fish worldwide. And also the solution here is how to help migratory fish so they can recover during their life cycles. And we also know that fish has a multiple migration strategy, and otolith is one of potential method for examining the fish life cycle. Okay. Okay, we give applause to our honorable speaker here, Prof. Lee Jason, and also Dr. Fu Piang. Thank you very much. Hopefully, we got a more and better understanding about the fish migration here. Finally, this is time we have to leave now, and maybe we can meet again for the next session. Thank you to all of the participants. Thank you, Prof. Lee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Terima
you.
kasih.
Yeah.
Sorry if
Thank
I
you.
have
See you next
something wrong.
time.
See you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, time I give it to the Sultan again.
Thank you, Prof. Lee. Thank you, Dr. An. Thank you, Frida.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Frida, for that our main session. It is such great time to have the speakers as well.
Thank you.
Especially thank you for Professor Lee Baumgartner and Dr. Fu An for the valuable and wonderful lecture to all of us. Next, the handover certificate for our speakers. To the committee, please share the certificate. Okay, the first certificate is for Professor Lee Baumgartner as the speaker of International Seminar, Fish Migration Management, How to be Successful and Sustainable. And the other certificate is for Dr. Fu An as the speaker of International Seminar, Fish Migration Management, How to be Successful and Sustainable. Next agenda, the handover certificate for our special moderator. To the committee, please share the certificate. Okay, this certificate is for Dr. Insinyur Frida Purwanti MSc as the moderator of International Seminar, Fish Migration Management, How to be Successful and Sustainable. Okay, for the next agenda, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you to fill the attendance form and check your e-certificate on these links.
Which link?
The attendance form is the upper link in this share screen. And also
we can
box.
download now. Can we download now or maybe later?
I think yes, you can download now.
Okay. I mean the certificate.
Okay, for the committee, maybe switch to the next slide. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you for the upcoming event from the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to our social media in the next slide. In this social media. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we are in the end of the event today. I would like to thank to all of our participants who attended today's international seminar. I would like to apologize if there are any mistakes or probably the words that I said may offend it. Thank you for all your kind attention. I'm Sultan as your Master of Ceremony, signing out. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Goodbye.